just begins the Audit and Finance Committee. Today is what, August, or not August, it's April, what, 27th. I just wanted to say a few things. I think this is a important meeting in many ways for our committee, particularly for 2020 at this point, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's sort of a double-edged sword at this point. There's the side of it that is the health side of it, and then we have this job loss side of it. So I think we are required to, this committee has to try to work very hard on reviewing the entire budget, because we can sort of foresee that we might run into some budget problems. So tonight we have on our agenda tax collections and revenue, and none of it is, there's so many variables, we're not quite sure how this is going to come out, but I don't think we're in the worst shape, that's for sure. This board's worked hard in the last several years to make sure that we have a pretty stable budget, and I think we're all very proud of that. But we're going to go through some really trying circumstances. So I want everybody in our partnership, the board, the administration, the faculty, all of our employees across the district, the taxpayers, and other districts through the ICTC and whatnot, to know that we're not going to leave any stones unturned on the budget. We're going to look at everything. So we're in this together. We have to stay united. And Jared is here, right? I think I saw him briefly.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jared. You want to start with the 2020-21 budget discussion, please?
Yes, thank you very much. We, as we always do over the past couple months, have been taking really a monthly look at the budget as things progress. Certainly things are changing more and more, or have changed since our March meeting. And they will continue to change till we look to approve a budget June 30th. So really what I wanted to do tonight, knowing that in 2-3 weeks, May 11th, the board will be asked to approve a preliminary budget, which is not approving a final budget. It is not setting a tax increase. It's not limiting the board to any actions to change the budget from that point forward. It's really just a mandatory step in the budget process that the state lays out for us. So really tonight is kind of presenting what could be that budget that we approve May 11th. And I really just wanted to go down through it and discuss some major changes that have happened over the past couple weeks, really since we went full-fledged into the coronavirus pandemic, into how it has affected our budget overall. So I'll just kind of go down through. I know the board has seen a copy of this that has gone out to them. So please, if any board members have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop and ask. But I'll just kind of go down through. I'm not going to go down through every line. I'm just going to talk about really kind of the major items that have changed. So the first one on the revenue side, and that's our first item on the agenda here, is tax collections. And really, as a district, Indiana, its local tax collections are its biggest source of revenue. There's no denying that. Some districts, it could be state subsidies, but for Indiana, our biggest source of revenue is our tax collections, and that being real estate taxes is the largest. What we are looking at for next year, where I have the budget at right now, is first of all a slight reduction in our assessed value, and that is just really at this point an estimate based on the last numbers I have received from the Assessment Office of Indiana County. They are still working on some tax appeals. They probably in the next month will set our final assessed value rate, which our 2020 taxes will be based on. So that information is still coming in, but this number that we have our collections are based on right now was their February certification. So it is down slightly from where we started. It's down about $10 million from where we finished or issued our 2019 taxes on. So we had some tax appeals, no large ones, just a variety of different tax appeals that came in. No single one was extraordinary. It was some more housing. It was some retail properties. But they are finalizing those, and they should be hopefully factored in when they certify our number in May. But we are also budgeting, in a typical year, we budget a 95% tax rate collection. And that has held true for us for probably the past 7 or 8 years, even as we kind of came out of the 2008 Great Recession. In light of what's happening now, I felt that it was necessary to reduce that number down from 95% down to 93, which is slightly lower than what we even collected back in 2008 when we hit kind of one of our lowest rates, which was 93.5. That 93% decreases our tax revenue by almost $600,000. It's a pretty big hit, but it is a budgeted number. We can always collect more, but right now I have 93% in there, which, like I said, was a $600,000 reduction. Just throwing out some other possible numbers there, as we have talked over the past couple of weeks. Taking it down to 90% would reduce what is budgeted here by another $870,000. Reducing that number even further, just throwing out some numbers that different board members have thrown out just to try and answer some of their questions. Taking that down to 85%, which is basically a 10% reduction, would reduce revenues by another $2.3 million. So a pretty significant hit to our budget if we were to reduce that budgeted number from 93% down to 85%. Basically, every 1% we reduce that number by or increase that number by, it changes our real estate revenue by about $290,000. So significant portion of our budget. The other major tax collection number that I reduced based on the current economic conditions was our earned income tax. And that is tax collected on everybody who lives in our district and who has some type of earned income. In the past couple of years, we have been collecting right around $3.9 million, almost $4 million. 1819, which was our most recent closed year, we were $8,000 away from collecting $4 million. So we have been close to reaching that $4 million, almost getting there. Based on the current economic conditions, I have reduced that number down to $3.6 million. So where we were budgeting almost $4 million a couple months ago, we have now reduced that number by almost $400,000.
So you're talking about So you're talking about right around 3 million.
3.6 million is where I made it. I reduced it by about $300,000. And that
what percentage is that? I'm sorry, say that again. How much is that?
We were collecting almost $4 million the past couple of years. So I reduced that down by almost $400,000.
And that's, can you put that in a percent?
That would be almost, what is that? 4%?
Okay, thank you.
And that number is, again, pretty close. And, the kind of the last economic conditions we have to compare to is, again, 2008. And that number is pretty close, a little slightly less than what we were collecting back in 2008. So trying to
this is a little different than 2000. That's been my concern. Just this is a whole different ball of wax from 2008. There's not a lot of similarities, because there's more job losses at this point. So, okay, go ahead.
Hopefully, I am working with Berkheimers, who is our local tax, our EIT collector, and they are just, they're starting to get March numbers in. They will be getting April numbers in here. I will be working with them over the next month or two prior to June 30th, because they do provide us estimates. They provide us with estimates as to what they think we're going to collect in a year. Now, that's pretty hard to do right now, but they will, I'll be working with them to say, hey, how bad do you see it being right now? What do you see? What has our collection rates been reduced by based on the current number of unemployed people? So we will get more information as in the next month or two before we pass our final budget as to what we feel that number could be, based on real information coming in on the current tax collections. And I work through Berkheimer's on that. So we will be refining that number as well as we work through this. So
exactly when, tell me what date our tax notices will go out in the next fiscal year.
They are typically go out somewhere mid-July. I mean, the board passes its budget in June. A day or two after that, we send the tax rates to the courthouse. And then it is, I would say, no later than the end of July do they mail the tax bills out.
Okay.
They print them. They go to the local tax collectors to put in envelopes and to mail. And then the tax bills are actually then brought to the district because we can take advantage of bulk mailing at our end to save some money. But usually no later than the end of July do those tax bills go out.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Also on the revenue side, real estate tax transfer, which is a tax that we collect on every piece of property that is sold in our district. During economic downturns, people usually aren't selling or buying houses as well. We, on average, we're probably collecting around $350,000 the past couple of years. I reduced that down to $250,000 to try and be on the safe side. Not a huge part of our budget, but it is another place that we usually see reductions during an economic downturn. On the revenue side, probably on local revenue, the other big piece that has been reduced is our interest earnings. And that's an area we've seen some significant increases over the past couple of years as the federal interest rate has increased, and we benefit from that. Last year, we earned around $292,000. That's the highest it's been probably in almost 10 years or more. And that, right there, can really help the district balance its budget. And we were receiving interest rates of over 2% on some investments that we had. Over the past probably 3 months, we've seen those interest rates drop to almost zero. So we went from pretty much a budget of $290 a couple months ago down to around $30,000. So a $260,000 loss in interest revenue going into next year. Pretty significant. And that's one area that kind of follows the economy as well and probably takes longer to recover as the economy does, because it's one place that the feds watch and they use to help economic activity. So for the next couple of years, we're not really projecting much in interest earnings, as this pandemic may take years to recover. Local revenue, those are pretty much the only major changes that I have changed since March. Any questions on that from any of the board members? Just a couple other areas in revenue then that have changed is we were looking at some type of increase or hoping for some type of increase in state revenue in our basic ed and special ed subsidies. Those were from projections that we saw from the governor probably about the beginning of February when he typically does his budget address, so that we at least have something to work on. We were budgeting about $100,000 increase in basic ed and about $25,000 in special ed, which are our two biggest state subsidies that we receive. Based on the current economic conditions, not only within our district, but within the state, we have reduced that down to nothing, hoping that we are at least maintained at the current level we have, which in basic ed subsidy from the state, the district receives about $9.8 million. And in special ed, we receive about $1.8 million. Just in context, we're hoping that stays stable and at least doesn't reduce. But even a 5% reduction in those two areas could be a reduction of almost $580,000 if the state would reduce those by 5%. So right now our budget has it level funded, and we're hoping for no reduction. But I did want to let the board know, because there was a question asked, what would a 5% reduction look like? And that would be, like I said, about a $580,000 reduction in state earnings, just in those two lines alone. So
you're up to well over $1 million then, if that happens on the real estate taxes, if you go to the 93%. And then if we were to take, even if you took a 2% reduction overall, you're still getting up there. You're getting close to $1 million at that.
Yeah, I mean, just a summary, and I know that the balance page right now, the projection for next year, the deficit for next year is just a little over $3 million based on all these changes. Back in March, we were looking at about $1.7 million. So between the real estate taxes, the interest earnings, the level funding of special ed and basic ed, and then the other significant change in state revenue is our transportation revenue. And that is because at this point we're not transporting students. And a couple board meetings ago, maybe two, we came up with an agreement with our transportation company, and for the last 45 days here. And because of that, because we're not transporting students, we won't receive state reimbursement on the money that we are paying our bus transporter from this point forward. And that's our understanding right now. I have a webinar tomorrow with our Pennsylvania school business officials to get some more clarification on if we may receive some transportation reimbursement, even if we are not transporting our kids, even if we are still paying the transportation company, not transporting kids, and they are not paying their bus drivers anymore. There's many factors that go into that. Right now, our budget has us receiving no transportation subsidy for these last 49 days of school, where we normally would. And transportation subsidy is always a year behind. So the money we receive this year in 1920 is based on our transportation information from 1819. So what we did this year is affecting 2021. So that's why we see that reduction in 2021. But we're also saving money in 1920 by not paying the transportation company the full amount we would have had we been transporting kids this whole entire year. So it's kind of a savings in one year to see a reduction in revenue in reimbursement the following year. So it almost pretty much cancels each other out. But it is a reduction in revenue next year, and I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out to the committee.
So Randy just asked a question if he wants us to zoom in, because I can't read it, if he could do that. So I think it says on this screen you have up now that you're looking at possibly a a $3 million deficit.
Just over $3 million. Yep, $3,044,000.
I think we'd have to be
really based on.
I mean, I think we have to be in pretty doggone bad shape, I think, if it got that bad. But I suppose.
And that mainly, I mean, we were at about 1.3, 1.7 at the end of March, before all these revenues were reduced and changed. So right now, I mean, I'm hoping this is worst case scenario, the $3 million. But the expenditure side of the budget really didn't change a whole lot. We at that point had made the board voted to eliminate a position, but that was already factored into the March presentation. So on the revenue side, the 2021 or the expenditure side, the 2021 budget really did not change from the last time we took a look at this. The expenditures right now are budgeted at the $56.6 or $56.5 million, with revenues of the $53.5.
Have you had so if we went through the major expense clumps, we were talking a little bit at one point about the debt. So can you tell us again, just to refresh our memories, what's coming due in October?
What debt payments are coming due in October?
We're going to pay off the junior high debt, right?
Yes, at some point next year, the junior high debt. I mean, our total debt payments because we have some payments in August, September, and October, and then we typically make payments again in March. But for all of next year, our debt payments are right around $3.4 million.
Okay, and when do we have to make that payment on the Ben Franklin money? Because that's about what, 350,000?
It's about 3.25, and we typically make the principal payment and an interest payment, I believe, in August, and then we make another interest payment in March.
So there is 1 year, as I remember, we did take from the proceeds to make that payment.
We did, the 18-19 school year.
And there's no restrictions on that. We could decide we have to do that again. They can't tell us we can't.
No,
Correct.
we cleared it with bond counsel. We cleared it with our financial advisors back in 18-19, and there's no reason why we couldn't do it again. And I did double check with them last week, and they saw no reason why we couldn't do that again.
What about refinancing the portfolio? Any talk on that now that rates have dropped? I'm not saying we do that. I'm just wondering because that's a lot of money. So
Yeah, no.
I'm curious what we could do to shave down on the debt side.
Yep, I did reach out to them. Like I said, last week, I talked to Jamie Doyle, who is our financial advisor, PFM. She handles all of that. Right now, I mean, most of our debt that was taken out while interest rates were at historical lows after 2008. So there really isn't at this point any refinancing that, I mean, you could do it, but it doesn't save you the money that it almost costs you to do the refinancing. So there really isn't savings there. She is looking at ways, and I believe she sent me an email around 4:30 about calling her. So I should have some more information to the board here shortly on that. Because I kind of asked her, are there ways that we could look at our debt payments to try and reduce those over the next couple years, just as I'm sure every district is looking at ways of saving money. And she was going to take a look at that. So we will probably talk tomorrow, and I can have some more information for you on that.
Yeah, I'd like to know what, individual series too. Could they make an exception that would, because at this point, if we can save $250,000 and shave that off, or that puts us that much. I'm thinking I'm not remembering all the bond series in my mind right now, but I know the junior high is coming due. But geez, we've been living with it for a long time. So I don't know if we can space that out a little, stretch it out for another 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's pretty much all. I'm trying to think. The 2017 was the Ben Franklin project. That won't be callable till 2022. We did just refinance the ESCO project in 2018. So those bonds, but we do have some. I mean, the one set to be paid off next year is the junior high. But I will talk to Jamie Doyle tomorrow, and I will get information out to the board then.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other than that, I mean, I know those were certainly very important points and pretty big reductions in some revenue. Are there any specific questions, that the board has on the 2021 budget at this point, on the information I gave you? I know, and Mr. Vukovic can certainly touch on it as well. We are having discussions, and we'll be presenting those here pretty shortly. We've already had some discussions with some of the board members about ideas of cutting some expenditures in 2021. We're still working out the details on that, so we don't really have anything specific to share tonight at the committee meeting, as this has been pretty quickly evolving over the past couple of weeks. But we will be having those conversations here over the next couple of weeks and with the board as well. So, Mr. Vukovic, anything you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Cronauer, and thanks, Madam Vice President. I think Madam Vice President set the stage pretty clearly that we're not going to go panic mode, but we're going to be smart. We're going to look at all of our options. We're going to map this out and make sure it makes sense for everyone. We're going to take our time to go slow and go fast. And the one thing, Madam Vice President, I would like to clarify for the board to make sure we're on the same page, because that matters to me, is when we do this, when we write to you, we're going to give you options. We're going to empower you to look at the whole entire picture and see and look at the options that are out there, and then allow the board to make the decisions what you think is best. I know when we do things like this, there may be things lost in translation or confusion, or people may say, "Hey, I want this," or "What about this?" I get that, and I respect all that. And again, we're never going to tell you what to do, but what we are going to do is do our best to give you options to make sure that we can plan the best we can for the challenging times that are sure to come. And you're right, Madam Vice President, we're all in this together. We have to be smart. We have to be strategic. And that's why we're looking at everything. Now, do we think it's insurmountable? No. Do we think it's a rather large hit? We absolutely do. And that's why we're going to work together to make sure we give you all the options. And there may be some that we didn't even think of. But our goal is to not tell you what to do. Our goal is to simply give you options. And I think at this time, that's our major responsibility. And that the board can go through and make those decisions in public, transparent, when applicable, and take our time to go through in each and every possible pathway. And I applaud you and the rest of the board for saying to us, make this a priority, start thinking through this, because it's a big to do. And I get worried about some of the money that's coming out of Washington D.C. and elsewhere, and how this may hurt inflation, hurt our other opportunities down the road, and we just have to be smart. So you have my word, Madam Vice President, that through either the committee systems where appropriate and/or executive session where appropriate, we'll continue to provide you a myriad of options for the board to look through, and they can decide what they think is best. And we understand there's going to be a lot of competing factors, but our goal, we feel at this point, is to give the board some solid options to consider as we go through this journey. Jared, would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we already have a pretty good plan, or not plan, but some ideas out there. We've been working on the past couple of weeks, and we'll be ready to present those to the board shortly.
But you feel as though what we have right now is we know what the hole is. You're looking at pretty much worst case, and you're looking at about $3 million deficit if everything turns south on it. But you think that's the bottom? Well, it's a big number.
And Vice President, we don't want to go into too much detail because we're not there yet. We have to go slow, go fast. Some of these positions will be brought up at policy and personnel or wherever it seems appropriate. So again, tonight we just want to assure the board and the public that we're working on solutions, that we want to be transparent, because we have to look at some solutions. It's just where we're at, but there's nothing to go into great detail tonight. But your words are that, I just like to reiterate what you said earlier about all of us in this together and having to make tough decisions, because I don't think we can escape that. I don't think we run from it. I think we own it, like this board always has done, because your record shows you've been good stewards financially. Look at the spreadsheet, right? Look at where we expected to come in. Look what you've done. And this will be our biggest challenge yet to date.
I'm pretty big on timelines at this point. I think Walter is too. And I'd like to hear what Walter thinks, but my feeling is that we have X number of days between now and the vote on the budget. So I think personally that we need to see some very serious expense options in front of us by the end of May, and I think that's plenty of time. And I think to keep your ears open with Harrisburg to find out, if there's any chatter about a couple of things, athletics, what's going to happen with them, social distancing, and also whether or not there's any talk that the state's going to dip below what they normally give.
Yes, Madam Vice President, you're absolutely right. We're on it. I think your time frame is prudent and it's spot on, and we'll be ready to go here in subsequent meetings.
Thank you. Walter, do you have anything to say? I'd like to hear what your take is.
Yeah, Julia, I have a couple things. Number one, I noticed that we have a committed fund balance on the line above, the unassigned fund balance. And if I remember right, it's committed primarily for PEASers. And if that's the case, I'm wondering whether your finance committee shouldn't, at some point between now and the end of May, take a look at whether leaving that as committed to that particular source is or that particular expenditure is appropriate, or whether maybe we should uncommit those dollars.
My question would be, Walter, I agree. My question is legally, I think we're going to have to talk to you. You are going to have to be in close contact with our legal counsel to find out exactly what our options are on that. I mean, one of the things that the state would probably have to look at are how long they can, where everybody's going to come up with this money to keep making these huge payments, and whether or not they're going to refinance it and stretch it out or pull out of different funds. But that's a big number. That's a big number. And
so my point is that, particularly if, as you pointed out, right now the hit to the fund balance is projected to be 3. Maybe we can squeeze another $1 million in savings and get that number down around 2. But my point is that if I recall correctly, that $750,000 was set aside as kind of an emergency fund to help with Peasers if we ever got in a situation where we couldn't handle the Peasers. And while I know there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now, Peasers seems to be somewhat under control. And I'm just wondering if it isn't time to maybe remove that commitment from that fund balance.
You're right, sir. That money was committed for increases in healthcare and PSERS, and it's certainly available to, if we need to uncommit it, to be used for really any of those, either one of those expenses. So
you're hearing that the fund is stable? I mean,
that's really just, it's there for the Indiana School District to use for whatever it would like. It just takes a board action to uncommit it, to be used for, we were still seeing increases in PSERS and healthcare next year anyways. It can be uncommitted to help with that. So it just would really
You're saying it takes a majority vote of the board?
The board voted to commit it. The board has the vote to uncommit it.
So it's not permanently restricted in any way, shape, or form?
No. Okay. It's just a board vote.
Well, that's good news, Walter.
Okay, so my and the pandemic's effect on the stock market may play with the Peasers, but the point I was driving at was, up until now, our obligation to the Peasers has that curve has been flattening out. We haven't seen those large jumps, and so that's the question that I'm asking, is whether or not this is the right time to unobligate those funds. Hopefully we won't continue to see those increases, but again, the unknown is what the impact that the pandemic's having on the stock market and the Peasers account.
Yeah, I can't imagine right now that that's stable at the state. I just can't imagine it, that they're not thinking about what they're going to do. But they can't turn to the local governments to keep picking up the tab. It's just not going to work anymore.
Agreed. The other thing, Julia, is that I think that after we get a clearer picture of what Mike and Jared and Rob and the whole gang there have been working on, as far as some of these, potential cost reductions, I think you should probably still put together a budget workshop meeting where we just focus on the budget. Again, I think we were talking about possibly here at the end of April, but with all the commotion that's been going on, maybe we need to do something like that in the middle of May, before we actually vote on that first preliminary budget.
So, Jared, our next meeting isn't until now, the end of May. So we need to get something done probably 10 days before that, I would say.
Well, actually, Madam Vice President, the Audit and Finance doesn't have another meeting scheduled till the end of June because the fourth
Oh,
Monday in May is Memorial Day.
Oh, I forgot. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking. Well, why don't you this week poll the board as to pick out some dates that suit the administration, and I mean, I think everybody's fine with these late afternoons. I hope so, but give us some options that we can choose from, and let's make sure we have a quorum because I think it's going to be important then to do it. I think Walter's absolutely right. We have to talk about this, and it has to coincide with where you are on some of these options you're going to have us look at. So there needs to be enough time to get prepared.
Okay, I can do that. Are we, Madam Vice President, if you're okay, are we okay moving on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, if anybody else wants to say something about the expense side of the budget, feel free right now.
Jared, I just want to ask Mike to weigh in here very briefly. I think we've only got do we have a second meeting scheduled for a board meeting scheduled for May? And if not, we should probably schedule one a couple of days after that budget workshop.
Well, I'm thinking, Walter, this is Terry. I was going to actually ask for that budget workshop, but I'm thinking we shouldn't wait very long. I know that we're going to have to hash out some of these proposed cuts, but we should do it soon as possible. Have a budget workshop, not wait till anywhere near mid-May or later.
Well, we're almost at mid-May now. I mean, it's April 27th. Time flies. Can you all, I mean, Mike, I think you and Jared have to decide whether or not you can be ready in 2 weeks. And I'm kind of thinking you're going to need closer to 18 to 20 days, but I could be wrong. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know.
Terry, let me not to cut Julia off there, but I know that, like I said, Mike and the gang there have been working pretty hard on trying to figure out what some of these cuts are, or potential cuts or reductions. I think we need to have take a look at this from the board's perspective once he's kind of finalized that, and then let the board digest that for 2, 3, 4 days, whatever, some period of time, and then have that budget workshop. And so that's kind of why I was suggesting the middle of May, was that if we have that discussion here next week or whatever, that would be great. But the board may want a couple of days after that to kind of mull it all over before we get into that actual budget workshop. That's my only concern. I agree it should be done sooner.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to make time.
We'll hash through the stuff next week and then have it the following week.
Walter and group, we could, on the 4th, we have an academic meeting, and on the 11th, we have a buildings and grounds meeting. Terry, I think you can probably shorten that buildings and grounds meeting and then do the budget meeting either before or after that, on the 11th, if you'd want to do that. Those are times that we have set aside as it stands. I don't know what, Mike, I didn't look at your agenda for the academic committee. That's pretty quick next week. But I'm thinking the buildings and grounds on Monday might be shorten that meeting up and then go to the budget meeting.
Here's the thing. A lot of people are going to be, if things go according to what the governor said, a lot of people are going to be back to work that day. That's going to be a hectic day for people if they have to get back into the office.
Sorry, which day are you talking about? The 4th or the
11th?
11th?
That's the day the governor's opening up, is going to try to start opening up the state. And
I thought it was the 8th, Julia.
no, I heard the 11th as well. Somebody needs to check that out. But I was thinking more to maybe if we could have something prepared by the 14th.
Yeah, I'm only suggesting the 11th because it's a day that we've already set aside for this. And Terry's not building very much right now. So it would be an opportunity to have that meeting.
Madam Vice President, if you're okay with it.
So what I would suggest, Julia, is what I was going to suggest, Julia, was kind of like what you had sort of started to suggest. Given that we've sort of told the administration, Mike and Jared, that we want to have that budget workshop as soon as practical, and still have some time between some of our some of these other discussions on cost reduction. Why don't we go ahead with your suggestion to have them put together a couple possible dates and times and think through this, and then come back to us with some recommendations on their part.
Yeah, unless anybody has a real serious objection, we're basically talking about the same week at this point. So yeah, I'm fine with that. Anybody else want to talk about expenses at the moment? Otherwise, we can move on. I think we have to talk about Chromebooks, don't we, Jared?
Yes, just information we are receiving, and I'm going to let Randy also talk on this as well. We would like the board to consider the possibility of purchasing some Chromebooks for next year's incoming freshmen out of this year's budget, mainly because what we would like to do is order them as soon as possible, because what we are hearing is, because all schools, based on the current closure, there is going to be a big delay in the delivery.
Madam Vice President, he broke up a little bit. I think what he's trying to say is we think there's going to be a backlog of requests, especially if the pandemic goes further into next year. So that's one of our concerns as well. So it's kind of twofold. One, the need to do the one-on-one if the board can so chooses to continue that process. But two, it's a real equity issue about what do we do for those kids if we are closed longer going into the fall. Now, we did a good job making it available for those families who are in dire need. But we do realize and do think that the demand for them far exceeded the supply. And what I mean by that is we are selective on who got them, meaning we priority based this on the kids who didn't have a computer, didn't have access. But then we also realized during this process that there are other families who do have computers, but maybe their families work at home remotely and they only have one computer, and then the 2 or 3 other kids had to share one. So we just need to discuss what that looks like. Randy, anything you want to add though to this about that? Did we do an okay job presenting that that conversational piece?
Well, yeah. The big thing is for the one-to-one. It's in my budget for next year already. So, but basically, I'm just asking for around 250 Chromebooks before July 1st, because I'm hearing that the lead time for ordering them and having them delivered is going to be 2 months or more at this point. And whether we come back next year as a normal start or not, that freshman class coming in is still going to need their one-to-one Chromebooks as our senior high is one-to-one through 9 through 12. So I didn't want the start of school to be and have the students not have their devices like they traditionally would. So I'm not asking for any more money. I'm not asking for anything like that. I just want to be able to order them early, which would be ordering them out of this year's budget. And then, Jared, you can kind of maybe explain how that would work. But basically, next year's budget would pay back what I purchased out of this year's budget. I wouldn't, because they're already in next year's budget. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, what we would do is the board would pass a motion, whether it's hopefully May 11th. To buy them out of this year's. We would take it out of this year's budget and just reduce the expenditures for next year based on that, because we wouldn't need them. Or we wouldn't need to make that purchase out of next year's budget.
Gentlemen, this seems like pretty much of a no-brainer. My question is 250 enough? Should we overorder? We were always going to have demand for Chromebooks. I'd certainly like to move this as quickly as forward so that we don't get caught in a shortage. We're going to have to replace some of the ones that are broken from overuse this summer. So I would certainly, for one, would move this forward as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you wanted me to overorder, that's fine. 250 is more than the incoming freshman class. This was not a discussion, or in my mind, purchasing additional ones to start passing extra Chromebooks out. Again, this was just what I had in the budget for the incoming freshman class.
And
So-
I understand that, Randy. I'm saying that if we're going to be depending on these Chromebooks tremendously over summer and into fall, if we come up 25 short, we're not going to be able to find them in September. This is and they won't wear out by sitting on a shelf if we don't need them. But
yeah, that's correct. I mean, I can order 100 more. I mean,
this would be a really good time to take a look at your replacements and quite frankly the extra demands on these things, and bring it to the board at the very next meeting, and let's get these things ordered, for goodness sakes.
Do you have the price locked in?
Well, unfortunately, there isn't a locked-in price, but we did just receive quotes for the grant that we just recently applied for, that Justin just did. So let me see, we are looking. I'm trying to. I thought I had it up. Yeah, we were looking at about. We were looking at, I think, 350 or something like that for the last for the grant. Now, obviously, the grant reduced us significantly, which I think we only ended up applying for 30. But it just locked in as good as that quote. But again, the Chromebooks, because of their flexibility and ease of management, are in very, very high demand right now. So, we can come up with a number, and then as soon as several of the vendors, if they have them in stock, they will lock that price and reserve those Chromebooks for me, so we can get that moving as well.
Well, I think to use your best, do what you can right now. Just do the best you can with it.
Okay.
And then report back to the board at our next meeting.
Yep, I can do that.
Julian, when you say report back to the board, a administration submits a request with a number of Chromebooks and a price tag on it. Let's get this thing moving.
Yep, that's what I'll do.
Okay, very good.
All
Alrighty.
I have a question, Ms. Terry.
Sure.
And I'm sure, Randy, you've discussed this or evaluated this. If we're in a virtual training atmosphere come fall again and through next school year, are Chromebooks our best purchase? Is there something that is better for virtual learning that we should discuss? Or
well, there really isn't a best. I mean, there's Windows, there's Macs. I don't know that Mac is a reasonable because of their price, and as far as security, virus securities, and all that kind of stuff. The Mac is the easiest thing the Chromebook is the easiest thing that we can manage with our current staff, but by putting them out. I mean, we can manage thousands of devices with our current staff, and that's what we've been doing in the school district for the past 5, 6, 7 years. We've been managing Chromebooks. We have filters already set up for that. We have software to manage desktops that's already set up for that. And to switch gears right now, I don't know that it would be economically feasible. I mean, Windows would obviously be the next best option, but I'm not sure that we can economically start outfitting all those kinds of things to make them as secure and as viable of a device when they're not physically in our schools anymore, with the software that we would need to purchase and everything for that.
Randy, this is Walter. Terry does bring up an interesting question, though, and from a non-techie here, I guess the question that I would ask or follow up to Terry's is, does a Chromebook have enough capacity for a student if we go to a completely online program for an entire year? That I think is kind of what he's getting at. Or is there another using the same platform but another physical device that would maybe be better suited to our students' needs?
I don't think so at this point. I mean, there's different things that we can deliver over that we can do behind the scenes, like software as a service. We've talked about that as administratively as a staff, which is what I would really like to look at start getting into, which would be delivering more of a Microsoft product via the Chromebooks. Again, our cyber school, our full-time cyber students currently for the past 5 to 6 years since we've had our cyber program implemented have used Chromebooks. So that's what we issue them. But whenever we do it there too. So our full-time cyber students are doing that full-time all year long with our Chrome devices.
Walter, this is Tom. When we looked at this 5, 6, 7 years ago, we did look at all the various platforms, including the Macintoshes, the Apples, and the Chromebook came out on top because of the cost and the flexibility. It's an interesting machine the way it delivers. It's certainly, as Randy just said, it's certainly supporting full-time cyber students as itself. I think that we have grown the system tremendously with the backroom supports and Randy's and his crew ability to maintain these things. Buying 1,000 other brand machines right now just would seem to be walking backwards in order to go to one-to-one. So I don't know why we would reopen this door and take a look. I think we should move ahead with the Chromebooks since they integrate. This is also the books that the ninth graders would be using for the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's true. Randy, what do you have reserved on the budget for this year for them, for the 250 you were going to buy?
Let's see, for on next year's budget. Well, we already purchased them on this year's budget because that was at the beginning. So I budgeted $67,500 for 250 Chromebooks in next year's budget.
And these kids are going to use them for the remainder of their education with us.
Yes, with our one-to-one program, we have I'm sorry.
Okay, so and the cost of changing potentially, let's just say you wanted to play around with it. How much would that double if you try to do that? Triple? What would be
well, we would have to. The Chromebooks come in with built-in management software, so you basically buy a $25 Google Chrome license for it, and we can manage thousands of different options in order to manage those in real time via the cloud. Windows doesn't really have anything like that, so we would have to investigate the software that would support that on a Windows device, and then we filter all our Chromebooks at home like they would be at school, to ensure that if a student has it outside their parents' guidance, that at least they're still filtered in general in accordance to the Child Internet Protection Act. We have software that does that on the Chromebook. We don't have something that would 100% manage a Windows device like that too. So it would be a filtering software package in addition to the management software package that would go along with all of that. So off the top, we haven't done that in the past, so I don't know what the cost for that would be. And then it would be the devices, which would not be $240 a piece for a Windows device. They would easily be $100 to $200, probably around $200 each more for a viable Windows device.
And Randy, when you say Windows, you also mean the Apple products too are going to have some inherent problems. One of the advantages of these machines is that they do have limited capacity. They only have the capacity that Randy gives them. So monitoring and controlling what's viewed is imperative. We give out full-fledged computers, MacBook Pros at $3,000 each. There's nothing they can't access, and Randy can't keep them from doing it.
Yeah, that would require a whole other set of software packages to run and force run on there, which we currently just don't have.
I think
Okay.
Randy, to kind of bring this to a conclusion, the main reason we were asking the question, or at least the main reason I chimed in on Terry's question, was because the world is different now than what it was, 6 months ago. And if we're going to be investing and looking at different ways of delivering our education system, we just need to make sure that whatever dollars we spend on these new devices, be they Chromebooks or whatever else, are actually going to meet the needs as we have to move into the future. And what I'm kind of hearing you say is that even though it has changed, the world that is, the Chromebook is still the preferred way of dealing with it.
Okay. I want Mike to wrap this up because we have an executive session starting. It's important in a few minutes, and we still have 2 items on this budget. So Mike, do you want to manage this issue and see what we can do between now and your next academic meeting?
Yeah, here's what we'll do, Madam Vice President. What we'll do is we know the price amount. We know the board's okay with us ordering off this year's budget. What we'll do is we'll see what we can bring to the academic committee about increasing the number amount that stays within reason, and we'll bring that Monday night. That way we can discuss it there, and then the board can act on it in the first meeting in May. So that gives us plenty of time if that's okay with you, Madam Vice President.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know that I'm real pleased about spending a lot of extra money without a lot of research. So let's move on. We'll put that. I think it's a good discussion though. So we have 2 things. Budgeting. We're gonna take an additional 7 minutes to get through budgeting for the August graduation ceremony and the performance audit, which was a nice report. So somebody pick up.
And I can take both those items real quick for you, Madam Vice President. The budgeting for August graduation ceremony, I just kind of wanted to give the board a heads up. And August was just kind of thrown out as a date, or I guess as a month, nothing set in stone. But what my conversation with the Mr. McWaney from the high school is if we're going to hold a graduation ceremony sometime after July, we just want to make sure that we have money in next year's budget above what is already in the budget for one graduation ceremony. So at some point when we come up with a plan as to what graduation will look like for this year, we may be coming back to the board just asking for some additional money to be put in next year's budget to pay for it if it happens after July 1. Because at this point we have money budgeted in this school year that may not be used. So just giving the committee a heads up, we may be coming forward with a request like that in the future here.
Okay. All righty. So you'll come back soon on that. I can't imagine it would cost more, but okay. Performance audit, please.
Julia, I have a question
Quickly.
For Jared, real quick. Can the board move to transfer those dollars to next year from this year's budget? And is there, in other words, is there a simpler, quicker way if the ceremony actually takes place in August?
I mean, we're talking about a small amount of money. What would just really happen is if we are holding the graduation ceremony after July 1, we wouldn't spend the money in this year, so it would roll into fund balance and we would spend it next year. We would just have to include that in our budget, and we will know that by June 30th. I just really wanted to make the board aware that may be a possibility. And it also depends on where you might want to hold it. Is it going to be at KCAC compared to the football field or something like that where it really won't cost us anything? Just wanted, Mr. McWaney and I wanted to give the board a heads up that we may be coming forward with that request sometime in the next month or 2.
Walter, anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Performance audit, please.
Yes, that is the state audit that we just completed last month. The state auditors were in for over, I guess, a couple month time period. The board received a copy of it as well. Were invited to the exit interview with the state auditor who was in charge. We just have a motion under audit and finance tonight to actually formally accept the audit so that it's on record that the board saw the audit and is aware of it. And just because it is on the agenda tonight for the full board, we wanted to make sure if there was any questions tonight we could talk about an audit and finance, and to let the committee know that that motion was going to be under the committee tonight on the full board meeting.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, I think Cinda, Uta, and I believe, attended the meeting. Good report. So does anybody have any questions for Jared about that? Because we will vote on that tonight. Okay, going.
No.
Thank you. We have finished at 6:32. That's pretty darn good. Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to stand adjourned, and next we go into an executive committee meeting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know it's been a lot of hard work. Thank you.